Hello and welcome. I'm Michael Cunningham. I'm Executive Director of Oxford University's North American office based in New York. I'm speaking to you today from my home on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. My colleagues throughout the university community join me in saying that wherever you may be today, we hope that you and your loved ones are well and that you stay healthy and safe during these challenging times. Our format today will be, as per usual, an hour-long session, and we invite you to submit questions to the Q&A function in Zoom today. Our speaker and I will keep an eye on the questions and do our best to select the best ones and ones that will provoke the most interesting responses, but also generate a conversation amongst us as much as we can have as we move forward through today's program. I've had the honor and privilege of working for Oxford for 28 years, and in that time I've worked with a number of Pro-Vice-Chancellors who've head the university's efforts in development and external affairs. My colleagues and I have especially enjoyed working with Pro-Vice-Chancellors who hold an academic position within the university and serve as our link not only to our colleagues throughout our global enterprise and alumni relations and development and special events, but also to our link to the academic community in Oxford. And so we were especially pleased when Professor David Gann was appointed to be our next Pro-Vice-Chancellor. The announcement was made a few months ago, and David took up his post in Oxford in November. And so at this point, I'd like to welcome David Gann to the proceedings and to have him join this session with our alumni here in North America and others who are joining us from other parts of the world. David, welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Michael. And well, good afternoon. I suppose it's lunchtime in some parts of the US and even not quite lunchtime in other parts. So I should say good morning and have a good lunch if you're having lunch while we're speaking. I'm talking to you from the south coast of England, where my family home is. And Michael, I joined Oxford on the 2nd of November, 3 days before the UK went into its second national lockdown. And it was a very strange situation actually to join a wonderful university, knowing some people there, but still not having met face to face with many of the colleagues that I'm now working with routinely, as you will be on Zoom. Anyway, it's very good to be with you and thank you for the invitation. What I plan to do is just say a little bit about myself so that you know who I am, and maybe that will help orientate some questions. And then I'll give you just a couple of updates on Oxford, some really good news, unique good news these days. And so we've got some good news coming from Oxford. And then just indulge a few thoughts about my own research as an academic. And we'll then take some questions and get into a conversation. Does that suit the bill, Michael?
It sounds perfect. Yes, thank you.
Well, let me see if I can share a slide and I'll kick off. So, Michael, you just have to let me know whether that can be seen.
You can see it, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the title of my little intervention here is Philanthropy, Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which happens to be the title of the last book that I published. And it happens also to be a succinct way of describing the sort of things I'm doing at Oxford these days and was doing before I joined Oxford when I was at Imperial College as Vice President there. I'm just seeing if I can mobilize these slides. And yeah, so who am I? Well, first and foremost, I'm an academic. I've been an academic all my life, for 18 years until recently at Imperial College, and I had a variety of roles there. And my work is on innovation and entrepreneurship. For some of you, you will know that there is a field of study in economics and in business strategy that focuses on this. Others, you might find that a little bit strange or something new to think that academics do studies of how innovation occurs and how we can learn to manage innovation processes. And improve the way in which companies and organizations perform. Well, I've written a number of books, quite a number of them published by Oxford University Press. And I'll talk a little bit about the Philanthropy, Innovation and Entrepreneurship book and the Playful Entrepreneur in a moment. Alongside my role as an academic, I have spent quite a considerable amount of time in public roles. I'm currently the chairman of the UK's Atomic Energy Authority, and you saw the backdrop behind me is the best performing fusion machine in the world. It's 8 miles south of Oxford in Culham, and the UK is a leader in fusion science, and we have the programme to put the first machine making electricity from fusion on the grid, and I'm enjoying my role in chairing the board and reporting to the Secretary of State. I've also had senior roles as a non-executive board member at the Ministry of Defence and in the Department of Health and Social Care, and I've just come off a meeting with the Secretary of State for Health on some COVID-related business where I'm still active. And prior to that, I was chairman of the Smart Cities Board for London following the Olympics, and worked with one Boris Johnson, who was at that time the mayor of London, and got to know him quite well. So on the other side, to counterbalance the public service, I've had an interest in business, and I've had 5 startups of my own. I'm currently on the board of a graphene company, Director Plus, which we floated on the stock market nearly 5 years ago. And we're the #1 in producing pristine graphene. And the little picture at the bottom there, you can see a woman with a face mask on. I don't know if you can still see me, but I've got my Oxford imprinted graphene face mask. It's the only material that has been tested and proven to kill the coronavirus as it touches the surface of the nanostructure of the graphene. I'm also on the board of Vencap, the venture fund of funds, one of the oldest venture fund of funds it's a UK company, but working around the world. And for some period of time, I've been on the Japanese electronics firm NEC's advisory council. So that's me. And well, in the middle, you'll see a picture of a bicycle. I'm a mad keen cyclist. I've had a small place in the Alps. I'd be mad keen skiing if I was allowed to get there at the moment, but I go cycling in the Alps. And I'm a beekeeper, in case you wonder why there's a beehive sitting there. Okay, enough on me. What's going on at Oxford? The COVID crisis has, I'm sure you've seen in the media, put a spotlight on Oxford like never before, I think, certainly in our living memory. And Oxford has done some wonderful things. First of all, on the vaccine, it had the genetic sequence, and within 100 days had developed a candidate for the vaccine, and the rest, as they say, in a short 9 months is history. Developing a partnership with AstraZeneca, developing then through the trials to prove the efficacy and the safety, and to gain the approvals, and then to be one of the first to get injections into people's arms. And it's a wonderful story. There's a BBC Panorama film about the making of the Oxford vaccine, and we're very proud to be riding high as a consequence of that. But that's not all we've done. 20 departments at Oxford University have been working on various aspects of the coronavirus, rapid diagnostics and testing. We've been mapping government responses around the world from the Blavatnik Centre, a global policy super tracker, working on national infection surveys, a lot of concern these days about mental health and social exclusion because of the way in which countries have locked down and people can't go about their daily lives, and new research on that. And a very important piece of work that showed that dexamethasone reduced the mortality rate for people recovering from the coronavirus. And that was a first coming out of Oxford. and not least establishing the use of new testing techniques, the lateral flow testing techniques. So I think Oxford, I don't mean this in too cheeky a manner, but it's had in some ways a very good coronavirus. Of course, people have suffered. Our workforce, our lecturers, our staff, our professors have not been able to live normal lives, and our students have been constrained. And a lot of our collaboration has had to go online. But alongside that, this year has brought good news, and I'm sure you've seen we were ranked for the 5th consecutive year as the world's #1 university by the Times Higher Education Supplement. And the Guardian University rankings also ranked us #1. We've had a big push on other important issues. The Black Lives Matter movement really put a spotlight on a number of historic and current issues at Oxford. And we've opened up new scholarships for Black British postgraduate students, and we'll be announcing more work for BAME community people coming into Oxford, and trying to redress some of the imbalance that we have and the lack of diversity, frankly, that shouldn't be there in this great university. We've also won a Nobel Prize. Mathematician Roger Penrose, picture of him there on your screen, for his work on black holes. And in spite of being locked down, we've raised a lot of money to support the university. The second best year ever in terms of philanthropic giving came last year, and we hope that we'll out-achieve that this year. Now, many of you will be used to this Zoom world that we're in, and our alumni community were worried that face-to-face eventing disappearing would mean we'd lose contact. In fact, we've had a 700% increase in people joining alumni events around the world during COVID. One of the challenges is going to be how we move when we eventually get beyond this terrible situation we're in with COVID, how we move beyond it into face-to-face meetings and sustain our communities digitally through these sort of meetings. And I'd appreciate your views on what works for you and how we might do that. Our communications has been stretched to the absolute limit because of the spotlight on Oxford. We had 87,000 articles and broadcast mentions in November alone, and I'm sure you've read stories in Wall Street Journal, New York Times, headline news. And just to end this bit of good news, if you woke up this morning, I hope in the US, the main channels did cover the story about INEOS, the chemical giant, the largest private company in the UK, giving a philanthropic gift of 100 million to Oxford. That was announced this morning for a new institute on antibiotic resistance and the research on what we need to do to solve what will be and is a slow burn pandemic around the world. And some hugely exciting work to be done there. You're probably aware that 80% of antibiotics are used in agriculture, in animals and in livestock. And this is going to have to change. And we need to do research on the whole systemic effect of how antibiotics are being used and what's happening with the resistance of microbes these days. There's a YouTube channel there to a little film clip that celebrates the launch of this new centre today. So I hope you feel proud of your alma mater when you see these headlines. This university has had the biggest impact in the biggest health crisis that has affected us in our lifetimes. And one of the questions is, how do we sustain that and deepen it and share it more widely? And your thoughts on what we can do together to promulgate the strength of science and social science and humanities at Oxford is something we would welcome. In my own work, I've been working for a number of years on how universities perform In my work at Imperial, I developed a number of the entrepreneurial systems and the venture funding systems that had good effect. And I published just before Christmas a comment in Nature on the role universities play. I also write a blog for the World Economic Forum and looking at some of the evidence of how universities are shifting in this new world. And one of the questions there is, what more can higher education institutions do, and can they do it more quickly? Because they play a pivotal role, as you can see, in transforming the landscape around us. Some of the things they can do in many ways better and certainly faster than large companies and certainly than governments. And one of the things we've learned from our vaccine experience is that we can create options. And as you'll know from business, options are one way of creating value. They allow us to have different responses to crises and to new agendas. Sometimes universities can work at speed, as we did in developing the first model of the vaccine. And indeed, we have a model of the vaccine already for the South African variant of the coronavirus. And we have agility if we use our resources correctly. So those resources of research, the incentives that we put in, the policies that we can deploy, with talented people, with the education and training that we give, allow universities to respond and even to be ahead of the game. I think the new areas we need to work on with standards, we see now in the UK, a standard setting authority with the FDA in the US as being second to none, actually, in moving ahead in a smart way to use data to set agendas so that we can get therapeutics out into the population. One of the things I like about Oxford's approach, of course, is that it's created a vaccine for the world, and it's done that purposefully in a way that we've invented a treatment that can be cheaply and quickly delivered everywhere, and we hope that that will succeed in the months ahead. When I was at Imperial, my main role was developing a new campus, and in front of you, you can see on the screen a shot of this campus in West London. And I had a wonderful remit here to set the strategy for an innovation campus, and spent 6 years spending over £1 billion and developing 1.5 million square feet of property for innovation. And some of the things that we might want to talk about is how can we do that at scale? What sort of capital do we need to invest? Patient capital for deep science, scale up capital so that we can grow companies fast. How do we attract inward investment? How do we become a magnet for talent? And these questions were in my mind at Imperial, and as an academic, I studied these questions and I wrote papers in economics journals and so on. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited at being in Oxford now is that having completed a large tranche of development for one great university, suddenly new opportunities arrived just up the M40, and that big motorway there, you can see cutting across the picture, leads you straight into Oxford. And with the ecosystem around us at Oxford, we really do have a force multiplier to develop capabilities at scale that will magnify what we can do in producing new knowledge that's useful for the world. And one other side of that coin, I learned really from direct experience working in West London, where we had a wonderful opportunity for a new campus right next to one of the poorest, most deprived housing communities in Europe. One of the things I learned there was that we had to engage, we had to share, and we had to communicate. And we set up the invention rooms with philanthropic money that came to us so that we could engage with the local community. We created hack spaces. We created the ability for people to come into coding schools, people who wouldn't normally touch a science university like Imperial. And there's much more of that I feel we need to do in and around Oxford, and also online with the communities that Oxford serves. So what do entrepreneurs do? And at heart, I really want to support the entrepreneurial journey for everyone, whether people are in the humanities, working on new forms of art and performance, or whether you're developing the next generation of vaccines. And some of you will be entrepreneurs, and I really look forward to hearing your stories and learning from you. And those of you who are not, and most of the time I'm not, I'm working in a large organization, Oxford University and the Atomic Energy Authority. I'm still thinking and trying to deploy my capabilities like an entrepreneur would, because the first and most important one is problem solving. How do we figure new ways around some of the problems that we face? What sort of opportunities do we find in doing that? And the second capability, which perhaps sometimes is a bit surprising, is to do that, we have to build new organizations. In order to put ideas into practice, we have to create organizational shapes that are fit for purpose. If we do that, we create economic and social value. And today our students almost always ask us, what sort of social purpose can they serve? It's not just about the economic value, it's about the social purpose. And entrepreneurs, of course, do that innovatively. And we see that time and time again from some of the wonderful US entrepreneurs that have enlivened our lives and our economy around the world. One other aspect to my work is trying to understand how digital technologies are transforming innovation processes. And I set up the Data Science Institute at Imperial with a lot of industrial funding coming in from data companies. And this agenda is only partway through. I think the next decade, we will see artificial intelligence and machine learning transforming right through the heart of what a great university is and how it operates. You know, in some ways, I see that universities have created the seeds of their own disruption because we invented AI. It was in the lab for so long, but now it's transforming education, it's transforming research, and it connects very much in to how we manage data, what we do with robotics, how that links to the Internet of Things, and how we secure data. What role does blockchain play? I think it will play a very big role. And you can see that rather strange looking, almost like a piece of art, that image on the right-hand side of your screen. That's a shot I took of analysis of an attack, a denial of service attack on Bitcoin when we were doing research on how blockchain works at Imperial. And we can learn an awful lot in the research community about how digital transformation will impact on our lives. And so I'm hoping at Oxford, with the Ethics in AI Centre, with the Oxford Internet Institute, and with computing and with a raft of other capabilities, we'll see a big uplift in how we transform the way in which Oxford provides its education, reaches others, and does its research. My own experience in this, and here are some of the companies that I helped to mentor into life, was really supporting the development of both student and staff companies at Imperial. I'll only talk about one, the middle one, my friend Chris Tumazu, who's the Regius Professor of Bioengineering at Imperial. He developed a lab on a chip, which he's holding there. And it's the first little lab that can do a full DNA test out in the wild in just a few minutes. And if you think you have you used to have your USB stick in your pocket, nowadays medics can have a little DNA tester in their pocket, And in the early part, the first wave of the coronavirus from February, March through April, May, I worked with Chris to transform his device, which was set up to test for nutrition in the consumer markets, into a medical test, a rapid COVID medical test. And we got full medical approval within 9 weeks with all the trials, including trials at the John Radcliffe in Oxford. I was really delighted to work with Chris on that. Now, this is the only bit of business school chart that I'm going to show, but it's important, I think, that when we're working together between academe and industry, we understand where the best sweet spot is for interaction. And one thing I learned is that if you've got the best academics, they want to work at the frontier of science and technology. They want to work on breakthroughs, sometimes with unknown markets. And yet industry needs to be working in its existing channels with its existing markets. And a lot of the time I was brokering the position for collaboration in this lozenge and helping to straddle those two worlds of the here and now in the marketplace, and where science is leading, and seeing how we can build bridges between them and get good funding in. Of course, Oxford has been increasing its industrial funding of fundamental research, and it can only do that if it manages this space between industry in the here and now and what academics aspire to do in breaking through knowledge for the future. Finally, I want to end just with a little bit of playfulness. I wrote a book a long time ago called Think, Play, Do, which was a look at how research and development and innovation was transforming with digital technologies. And at that point, I got very interested in the role of play. You know, play is the thing that our children do, and that we did as we were children, to learn about the world. It means so many things. And I did touch into Rousseau's work when I was exploring the word play. And those of you who've read Rousseau will perhaps remember he wrote an amazing book called Emile. And Emile had a wonderful disposition in life that I think would serve us well now. And just let me quote you. "Work or play are all one to Emile. His games are his work. He knows no difference. He brings to everything the cheerfulness of interest, the charm of freedom." Now, for an educational institution with 900 years of history, those are the sort of values that we want to cherish, aren't they? The cheerfulness of interest and the charm of freedom. And unfortunately, our schooling normally dulls that out of us, and we end up conforming. And I hope we can breathe again out of this pandemic and think about being more playful in the way in which we work and collaborate together. And there's a serious side to this. In writing the book, The Playful Entrepreneur, which was published by Yale University Press in the US, I interviewed Robert Skidelsky, Lord Skidelsky, the wonderful biographer of John Maynard Keynes. And he gave me a fantastic quote. I asked Skidelsky, what would Keynes say about entrepreneurs? And Skidelsky said, the more unstable the parameters in the world you find yourself in, the more the insights or intuition of the entrepreneur matter. And I think we should remember that. You know, entrepreneurs can be a little bit crazy, they can be edgy, they're prepared to accept and take on risks, but they have insights and intuition that can help us navigate and pivot in these very difficult times. So with that, I'm going to throw the rest of the discussion open, and I look forward to hearing your questions and comments. I should just name check two things. Neil Wolff introduced himself to me the other day with the Oxford Entrepreneurs Network. and I don't know a lot about it yet, but what I do know sounds very good. And as one of the leaders at Oxford now, I am very keen to support and promote what can be done through networks like the Oxford Entrepreneurship Network. And I've just come from a meeting with one of our great academics, Wes Williams, who is the leader of Torch, which is the network in the humanities, which relates our academic work back out to new audiences, to existing audiences, to wonderful areas where the humanities in all their forms, the performing arts, our orchestras, and so on, need to touch people's lives. And so those are two touch points for me that I want to champion. But I also want to hear what you think we need to do and what you can do to help us build on Oxford's success. We're flying very high at the moment. The halo is across Oxford because of what we've achieved in fighting this coronavirus. And we need to sustain that, and we need your help and ideas and support and engagement to do that. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to hand back and hopefully I've now appeared as myself again.
You have, yes, magically. Well, thank you, David. That was really fascinating. We have some questions coming in. Before you perhaps go to them, perhaps you'd like to just expand a little bit more on, you touched on it, but what really compelled you to accept this new position? You obviously were having an amazing tenure at Imperial, and I think you won't get much argument from the people on the line of the magic and the appeal of Oxford, but what appealed to you personally about taking this new position?
Well, I mean, it's a good question, and I can blame COVID actually, Michael, because just to indulge a little bit, I had decided that I'd finished doing the sort of executive roles that I'm now back in. 6 years, just over 6 years at the top of Imperial, which is a pretty impressive science university. Building a big new campus, it's demanding, it's exhausting, and you've done your work after that period. And I'd taken on a number of non-executive positions and government roles, and was not looking to come back into a university in the sort of role I'm in now. And when I was approached, I just had time to think about it because I wasn't moving anywhere. We were in lockdown. Coronavirus was on. And the more I thought about it and talked to people at Oxford around the edges, the more interesting it became to me. And so it percolated in. And I thought, well, wow, and I got my energy back actually, because, like some of you listening in, you might have had that experience. Suddenly things stopped in the way you were doing things. It gave you some thinking time. And, I wanted another big project. And actually Oxford's got several big projects. Now, the other thing, Michael, is that you can see this wonderful machine behind me. Well, that's the world's greatest fusion device to date. And that's 8 miles down the road. And I became the chairman of this incredible organization, the UK Atomic Energy Authority. And so I was traveling in and out right next to Oxford. And I thought, actually, I can combine some of these things together here. And that would be a good fit. So it just transpired in that direction for me. Yeah.
Well, we're glad. We're certainly glad it did. I've had a chance to take a quick look, David, at some of the questions already, and perhaps I could just take one for you, and then if you have time to, or can scroll through and pick out ones that you would like to answer as well. But one comes from John Dupree, who asks or notes that in the United States, one of the challenges in the commercialization of university-led invention is the difficulty in obtaining access to IP owned by the university. Tech transfer is commonly slow, very bureaucratic, highly risk-averse exercise, particularly for a university to license to an entrepreneurial founder as opposed to a large incumbent enterprise. John asks, any solutions? Is the ownership of university IP similar in the UK as in the US?
Well, thank you, John. I'm very, very familiar with this question and worked on it at Imperial, and we moved up the ladder in terms of our capabilities to manage IP. You know, this cuts in several different directions. So if you're very loose with your IP, value dissipates quite quickly, and I think that having clarity around the rules over IP is absolutely essential, but then needing to be agile as to how you form startups, licenses, collaborations, whichever way you're going to move it into practice. I mean, my agenda is to see more ideas flow into practice and to create more value in the systems and networks around Oxford internationally, of course. And, you know, there are various ways we can do that. There's a huge spectrum here. Places like Imperial, which I know very, very well because I set many of the systems up. I mean, we even floated our tech transfer office on the stock exchange to create our own fund. We were the first university in the world to do that, which was innovative at the time. I know Oxford has a good pedigree and has a lot going on. And actually, with the collegiate system, in the colleges too. Some colleges like Magdalen have 100% ownership of Oxford Science Park, where there are some extraordinary things happening. We need to have clarity and I think also diversity. Some ideas move so fast, you can't even touch them down on the desk, particularly in digital. Others need to be carefully managed, and we did that with the vaccine. And we built a great collaboration, which I think, you know, we're well on track now with the delivery of. And in the end, a lot of value will come back to Oxford from that, which we can reinvest. So I think horses for courses, we need clarity and we need to be fleet of foot. I understand your question. It's not easy, but we will work on this and together.
I feel like another one, David, I could do a similar theme, but Tommy Doyle asked, states to start, these results are fantastic to see, expanding on the antibiotic resistance issue and theme. Can you talk about what other strategic areas of interest or problems that the university may focus on solving in the future?
Yeah, I mean, the health one's obvious, isn't it now? So I hope by the middle of this year, we'll be in a position to fully form a new Centre for Pandemic Preparedness, you know, which would take all of that vaccine and testing and tracing work and so on into a new mode. We'll have the AMR Centre up and running. And then there are a number of other big health ticket items that I think our colleagues want to work on. Mental health is one of them. So transforming medicine, I think, will be a big pillar. And Michael, I should be careful here how I deliver my answer because, you know, I'd like to come back in a few months' time. We're putting the development strategy together. It needs to go through the leadership team at Oxford before I can talk about it in detail. But I don't think it's a secret that transforming health will be one of our big pillars into the future. Another one that you will know about is the Humanities Project, you know, with the Schwarzman funding already and the new things that can happen around that, the new concert hall, the new facilities that we'll build. Now, I came in and inherited what is a midway through an amazing project and program of work. And I'm passionate about the arts and music particularly. And I would like to see that come to fruition as quickly as possible. You know, there are one or two other very big areas that we'll work on. And perhaps I should say that the way I envisage this is that we have the big pillars, the multidisciplinary things that will transform the world in the years to come. But we also need to work together on the new horizontals. Digital affects everything we do. AI will affect everything we do at Oxford. And I want to see us organize in a better way around that. It won't surprise you to know that I think entrepreneurship affects or should affect and have something to say for everything. I see that as a horizontal. And I'd like to see us become the entrepreneurial university, as well as one of the most historic universities. Those two things can live side by side if we design it properly. And so, Tommy, your question, a very good one. Could you watch this space? Can you feed into it as well? And end of March, we'll be delivering our strategy through the university. After Easter, we'll be discussing it and taking it live and working on it. And you'll have opportunities to hear more and interact on it as we go in.
I can see we're getting a lot of questions, David, but I thought maybe I would pick out one a little bit different for you, just a change of topic. But Rahul Jindal asks if you can comment more on how Oxford is working to reduce disparity and achieve equality. You alluded to the program that Imperial worked on and reaching out to the community and engaging people in need. And obviously there are concerns about Oxford and white privilege perhaps being entrenched. And I know it's early stages for you, but just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can probably come in as a newcomer and say some things that maybe if I've been there a few years, I might not say in the same voice. So I recognize this question writ large. And in a place like Oxford, sometimes your history becomes a bit of a shackle in how you see yourself and how others see you. And to my delight, Oxford isn't like I thought it would be when I joined, so to speak. First of all, it's far friendlier than I ever expected. I've really enjoyed the convivial spirit that people have inducted me into. And, you know, that's in a time when it's not been possible to do the things that you know Oxford for, which is sharing dinner together and sitting in these beautiful historic colleges and enjoying that ambience, or going to the Ashmolean. You know, I haven't set foot in the Bodleian or the Ashmolean since I became a member of faculty. And I haven't been there for years, in fact. And that's COVID for you. But, you know, there are some serious issues for us to tackle on the inclusive and diversity agenda and equality agenda. And, you know, this cuts through in different ways. I mentioned Black Lives Matter and the BAME community. You know, we are woefully underrepresented. I think we have just recently had our first Black head of house, Baroness Amos at University College. And, you know, the representation of women in leading roles. Well, I'm delighted to see women PVCs and a fantastic president, you know. But Oxford has a lot to do, as do other higher education establishments on this front. And I think we have made good inroads actually in equality of opportunity to come to Oxford. And thanks to great philanthropy and gifts, particularly from colleagues like Mike Moritz in the US, we've been able to open up scholarships to give access to people who wouldn't normally have the wherewithal to attend. And we need to do much more of that, actually. So, you know, I think that agenda is an ongoing one, and it's one that we shouldn't shy away from. Otherwise, well, look, I'm an innovation person. Where does innovation come from? It comes from diversity of thinking about problems and opportunities. And that diversity has a number of different degrees. It has a demographic as well, you know. We need some younger people, not just like my age, running some of the shop. And so, Michael, I see this all the way around. Rahul, I think it's a great question, and you need to hold us to it. We need to keep working on it.
Mm-hmm. Sort of related to that, David, addressing your role as sort of the head of the Oxford alumni community, global community, Alicia D'Souza notes that philanthropy drives innovation and social progress. And she wonders what role alumni can play in terms of the university's fundraising aspects, building awareness, building volunteer opportunities for our alumni, donations, gift giving levels. Also, she also refers to the Oxford Thinking campaign and wanted to know you alluded to some big picture themes, a little early to tell, as we noted, but what role can alumni play, do you see?
Yeah, I mean, incredible role. And, my experience with, I have to say, my experience with the Imperial alumni, I think gave me something to think about, in that without you and without these networks, without your advocacy and without you influencing, then it makes our lives much, much harder when we're trying to get new things off the ground. And it's not just about the money. In fact, we often concentrate too much just on the top of the pyramid for one or two big gifts, so which we're incredibly grateful for. When Jim Ratcliffe at INEOS comes with 100 million for antimicrobial resistance, thank you, Jim. But the regular giving, and we need to do more on that. If I look at the top performers in the US, universities like Princeton, they completely outperform us in terms of the regular giving of small amounts from their wonderful alumni network, and our alumni network could do an awful lot more. But we need to deserve that too, and that's partly and first and foremost being engaged. And look, I like engaging with people, and I've very much enjoyed traveling the world and meeting groups of alumni in my previous role, and forming new alumni associations. I set up the Shenzhen Alumni Club for Imperial, and a wonderful group of entrepreneurs run that, and they got into giving pretty quickly, actually. I want to work with you, and I will support Christine Fairchild and the Alumni Board in Oxford, but I will also reach through to you personally if I can, and be with you if we can do events again. And if not, we'll do more virtual, and we'll get together from time to time. And I want to hear your questions. But I also hope that you can help. I mean, by dint of the fact that you studied at Oxford and have gone on to do wonderful things in your careers, you are influencers, and we need you to be our advocates. And there are things here in the US that you can speak up for. The use of vaccines, when we hear the voice of the anti-vaxxers, that's one thing. And you can set the record straight on the evidence, and Oxford really almost demands that of our alumni network, but we need to help with it and engage with it. Yeah.
Another big theme, and I know it's something important to you, David, as well, and Juliet Altham touches on this. She notes that she read in National Geographic magazine some time ago about Oxford-based climate change initiatives attempting to build collaboration between scientific research, political institutions, corporations, etc. Obviously touches a lot on your various areas of interest, David, and your areas of expertise. Again, obviously early days for you, but your thoughts on these types of initiatives, particularly Oxford's role in combating climate change.
Yeah, I mean, we have some very, very good research on that and leadership in it. And I think it's been slightly overshadowed by the excellent work that Oxford's been doing on the pandemic. And one of my worries actually is the damage that, or the lack of visibility that we have for some of the other very important issues. Climate change, in my mind, is as serious an issue, if not more serious, for the world than this pandemic we're suffering at the moment. It might not be felt as acutely all the time, but in some parts of the world it's felt pretty acutely. And of course there's a great connection here. If you look at the evidence of people dying from COVID, certainly in some of the European countries and cities like Milan and London, they happen to be living in areas with poor air quality. And that poor air quality relates to lung health, and health and poor air quality relate to the quality of the climate and what we've done to it. And so this is a circular thing. We're not going to really get away from pandemics and the sort of problems that we've got with antimicrobial resistance and what we're doing in agriculture, if we don't deal with new ways of understanding what we're doing to the climate. And that's where the integration of these processes and thinking comes. And that's why Oxford's such a good place to do it, because we have the academics in the different disciplines coming together to work on these issues. And they can perform at the highest level, you know, at the World Economic Forum, in the big think tanks, and put their evidence in front of world leaders.
We've had a number of questions, David, you may have seen coming back to innovation, entrepreneurship. A concern, Gary Noble and Neil Wolf, both kind of similar questions. Gary notes that, as you say, educational systems often stifle innovation of the mind. Neil points out that sometimes within Oxford, competing approaches to entrepreneurship. How can the university, how do you see a way forward in the university approaching these kind of issues around innovation and entrepreneurship?
Yeah. I mean, education itself has become something that we sometimes see on a league table, you know, and leaders of education organizations often just play out, how can we keep moving ahead? And that's not a way of enlivening the mind, in my view. Thankfully, Oxford and some of the great universities, certainly in the US, are able, because of the resources they have and their culture and their capabilities, to stand outside of that a little bit. But they get sucked down. You know, one thing I would celebrate is diversity. I like the fact that Oxford is different from Imperial College, and both of them are great places. MIT is different from Harvard. And, you know, we need to have diversity of choice in the education that we give people. And, you know, it's healthy that they should compete a little bit as well. This creates a bit of friction. As an innovation person, I like creative abrasion, you know. I like to be able to josh with my mates at MIT that our Data Science Institute at Imperial was as good as anything they did in the Media Lab, although we did it in a different way. That gets you, that gets your mental juices going as well. And when we're, as educators, you know, we need some freedom around that. You know, I used to, it's interesting, also culturally, someone coming from a North American background or a European background, if I was supervising them for their master's project or their MBA project, you know, they'd be questioning my thoughts. That doesn't always happen. You know, there are different cultural dispositions to learning. Sometimes people come and sit at the feet of the great professor and say, well, tell us what to read next. Actually, why do I engage with students? Because I want to learn from them. They have more time to read and explore than I do these days. And Oxford's like that. You know, the tutorial system allows us to do that, but it's a very expensive system to run. And unfortunately, most education institutions just do not have the capacity to operate in that mode. And often it gets dulled down and the playfulness disappears. So look, it's down to everyone to keep Oxford riding high and to make sure that we have some serious play somewhere in the way we educate our next generation.
We're approaching, we're getting close on time here, David. So a couple more questions, if we may. David Hill does touch upon graduate students, and you alluded to this, and perhaps he notes that in science we tend to steer our graduate students to less risky projects where they are assured of getting their thesis completed. But is there more? Should we be thinking more of pushing, or are we pushing them more, most innovative thinkers now, into startup companies rather than seeing them in academia?
Oh, David, that's a great question, which we don't really have time to indulge in a long answer. And I don't know enough about. I can give you the headlines that, you know, Oxford has almost as many postgraduates as it does undergraduates, and quite rightly, because it's so research focused. When I was at Imperial, which was only a few months ago, we recognized that some of the best talent in our community was the least loved, and that was our postgraduate community and our postdoctoral researchers. You know, they were making their way, doing their stuff. They had brilliant, top of the learning curve brains, and yet we weren't helping them enough. And so we set up entrepreneurial venturing schools for doctoral and postdoctoral students, or postdoctoral researchers. And we helped them with their startups, and we gave them options on that. We didn't want them just to leave and work for DeepMind, which was happening. So we gave them both. And I don't think it's either or. I mean, you know, they should be exploring the boundaries of knowledge, but they should also, some of them, have the opportunity to put ideas into practice at the right time, and we should help them with that. And I don't know enough about what we do at Oxford, Michael, to say anything in detail about that at this point.
Great. Last but not least, a couple of people, including Nick Bratt, have asked, your camera wasn't on when you put on your graphene mask. So people are intrigued by your graphene mask. And
I have a variety of graphene masks. I've got the black one with the Oxford logo printed.
Very stylish, yeah.
Yeah.
And those are on the market, or are those not on the market?
Yeah, you can go online on direct, but you know, I'm now transgressing my role here. I'm for a company I'm on the board of.
Fair enough. People did ask, so I think it's
going to be. I think there's a Los Angeles Times article coming out on this company. So Michael, if that comes out, I'll send you a copy, a copy, and you can circulate it.
Sounds good. So David, before we end, first of all, thank you for being so generous with your time. And I wasn't able to get to all of the questions, but lots and lots of people also offering their help and want to be involved, which of course is wonderful to see. And I know I speak for many people who say as wonderful it is to see you virtually. People look forward to meeting you in person and welcoming you to our vibrant alumni communities all across the United States and Canada. Are there some thoughts or just something you'd like to share with our audience? We came close to, I think we were about 180 people online at one point. So anything you'd like to share before we end the session?
Well, I mean, I've only just about been able to keep abreast of the questions and comments, Michael. One of the jeopardies of this style is that I can't see you, but I can see the comments streaming in, and I can hardly read them quickly enough to respond. And I just thank you for that engagement. I know it's difficult from your side to try and participate, and it's frustrating. It's equally frustrating if we were in a hall or a convention and you put your hand up and you weren't pointed at, but you at least feel that you've been part of something if you're physically there, and we could have a chat afterwards over a beer or a glass of wine. I'm sorry we can't do that. I would love to engage, and I've just flicked through a few other comments and questions and offers to help or engage in new ways, and questions about volunteering. Look, we'll come back to you on some of that, and I have to look to you, Michael, and your wonderful team in the New York office that covers the whole of North America, and the alumni groups and leaders and the friends of Oxford in America to help support that engagement. And we really must engage, you know, on a regular basis. And I'd like to hear more from you. Hopefully, later this year, I will be able to get on a plane and come and visit. And some of you will come and visit back in Oxford.
Well, again, I know we all look forward to that. I look forward to welcoming you to the United States and to work with you on behalf of this great university. So on behalf of Professor David Gann, our new Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Development and External Affairs, and on behalf of my colleagues in the North American office, thank you for joining us. We look forward to staying in touch, and please look out for our notices on our website, www.oxfordna.org, and on our social media platforms for our next event. But with that, again, with thanks to David Gann, we'll say thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.